Hello everyone, and thank you for attending today's webinar, Taking the Next Step with Wi-Fi 6E, sponsored by Walker and Zyxel. Before we begin, I wanted to cover a few housekeeping items. On the right-hand side of your screen is the Q&A. If you have any questions during the webcast, you can type your question into the Q&A box and submit your questions to our speakers. All questions will be saved, so if we don't get to answer you, we may follow up via email. At the bottom of your audience console are multiple application widgets you can use. If you have any technical difficulties, please click on the yellow Help widget. Here you can find answers to common questions. A copy of today's slide deck is available for download in the green Resource List widget. Towards the end of today's presentation, we'll ask for your feedback. A survey will pop open on your screen and will only take 1 minute to complete. Your feedback is extremely helpful. An on-demand version of the webcast will be available about 1 day after the event and can be accessed using the same audience link that was sent to you earlier today. I would now like to turn the event over to Heavy Readings Analyst at Large, Simon Stanley.
Thank you. Hello and welcome from me as well. And I'm joined today by Andrew Quilla, who is Product Marketing Manager at Zyxel Communications. Andrew, perhaps you could just tell us a little about yourself and also Zyxel Communications.
Absolutely, thank you. So I am Andrew, the Product Marketing Manager at Zyxel. Zyxel has been in the in the technology field way back when with the analog models up to today with
Sorry, I think we lost you for the last little bit. Perhaps you could just finish up about Zyxel.
Oh, just that Zyxel has been, in the space for over 30 years now. We specialize in wireless routers, extenders for service providers. Yeah, I've been with Zyxel for about 17 years now as well.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. Let us go now on to the agenda. Now, for today's presentation, Andrew will explore some of the leading Wi-Fi challenges, give an overview of Wi-Fi 6 and Wi-Fi 6E, and explain how to leverage Wi-Fi for multi-gig connections. And then Andrew will finish with a look at remote and cloud-managed Wi-Fi. During the webinar, there'll be 2 polling questions, and at the end, there will be a Q&A session. So please do take part in the polls and send in any questions that you have for Andrew as we go through. So with that, I'm going to pass over now to Andrew. So over to you, Andrew.
Great, thank you. All right, so let's get started. To begin, just a quick overview of what we've been dealing with since coming out of the pandemic, COVID, things like that. The new reality is several are still working from home and continue to work from home. And out of the pandemic, we discovered that, in general, I'd say wireless and bandwidth, these types of things, were not able to keep up with the demands of everyone being at home at the same time, whether it be remote learning, streaming, gaming, everything combined. We really found out that there just wasn't enough to go around. And in some of these cases, some of these situations, it could have been resolved simply by implementing a Wi-Fi 6 or 6E gateway to help with some of the things I'll talk about. Okay. All right. So to most, Wi-Fi is the focal point of the home, right? It's the internet. Most subscribers don't really worry about how it's being delivered, fiber, cable, whatever the case may be. All they're worried about is their wireless performance. They want to make sure that they have wireless throughout their home. And ultimately, what they want is a fast and on-demand experience always, right? They always want to be able to get on, do whatever browsing they want to do, streaming, content, video calls, and of course, remote learning, things like that. We need to have a fast and reliable connection in the home. So overall, Wi-Fi, it's not perfect. We're working towards it, getting to that capability of a wireline speed, but ultimately it's still progress, and there are several things that can cause a negative impact to your wireless. So there's a lot of various factors, especially even the materials that homes are made out of, that can interfere with your Wi-Fi. And we're constantly working, evolving this technology to overcome these obstacles. All right, and as you can see, Wi-Fi has come a very long way, continue evolving, continue moving forward. These back-end technologies, as you can see way back when with the 11B, we had a very basic router, and we've moved on towards up to Wi-Fi 6. The renaming has been a bit easier, especially for subscribers. Wi-Fi 4, 5, 6, 6E, eventually 7. Has become much easier, and at least I pair their devices up with the correct gateway. And of course, you can offer the latest available solutions. A bit more on how Wi-Fi has evolved and over time. Way back in the early days of Wi-Fi, there was only a handful of devices in the home, 1, 2, 3. Not a whole lot of Wi-Fi going on. Everything was really wired. You had, I'd say maybe one primary computer wired to your router that was used for your day-to-day. And eventually, obviously, as things have progressed, we've gotten Wi-Fi in everything. You name it, there's a Wi-Fi version of it. So we're seeing now that, the average user, you count them to 30, 40, some cases 50 devices on the network at the same time. A lot of these, especially now being IoT devices, so they have that sort of always on, always connected setup. So it's constantly using the Wi-Fi, constantly communicating with the Wi-Fi. So we're definitely seeing an increased amount of devices in the home, even the amount that the average person carries, whether it be, their laptop, tablet, phone, watch, especially watches now, everything's Wi-Fi connected. So we're seeing a big increase in terms of the amount of connected devices in the home, and obviously the wireless devices at the same time. Another challenge we commonly face is coverage, whether it be the installation location, whether it's not central to the home, at one corner of the house. There's always going to be challenges with covering and blanketing the entire home, sort of creating that umbrella with wireless, so that really you can use wireless wherever you are throughout the home. And this is where we get into things like adding extenders, mesh technology. Ultimately, coverage is always and will likely continue to be a challenge moving forward. Simply because the nature of wireless, it's still a radio, right? So it can only reach so far. And that's, again, why we have these other advancements coming with mesh, extenders, things like that. And now I'll speak a bit about mesh and mesh technology. That was sort of really came to the market through retail to begin with. And we've adopted a lot of the same features and technologies into service provider gateways to be able to provide your subscribers with the best experience in their home when you're adding extenders. Sometimes they're referred to as pods, things like that. So really, mesh was designed to essentially to extend your coverage and provide a better experience as you move throughout your home in terms of wireless. And that brings us to really the question is, do you really need an extender? It's always kind of a hit or miss. There's no perfect one-size-fits-all solution. I noticed in a lot of cases, it's, you have a dead spot, just throw an extender in, which may or may not always be to the home, primarily where the gateway or the router is installed, whether it's not in a central location, it's on one side of the home, you want to place an extender on the other side of the home. There's certain situations where it doesn't make sense, and certain situations where adding extender will cause a worse experience, whether the extender is installed too close. We run into things like bounce behavior where clients can't decide which device to connect to, a lot of movement there. So just something that comes along with implementing mesh using extenders. But ultimately, mesh does offer and bring us a lot of value in terms of experience and optimization for the overall wireless network. Again, especially with a lot of devices connected on the wireless, integrating something with mesh, we have a much better experience, and that's ultimately what we want to provide: is a better experience for our subscribers. They're not calling, complaining, having trouble with Wi-Fi. And these are just some of the things that mesh brings. Easy to install, easy to add extenders. And as we move forward with Wi-Fi 6, from the previous Wi-Fi 5, we do see also improvements in the mesh side, in the easy mesh standard, which most products are based on nowadays. And that sort of brings us into gateways, routers, extenders, and mesh solutions. Having the ability for the router to control offloading them when there's high bandwidth demands, using these internal algorithms, taking various bits of data as far as the signal, the average transmit receive, things like that, to decide and ultimately provide the best experience for all of the devices on the wireless. Again, that's the goal, is so that it does everything automatically and we don't really have to worry about it. Okay. Another nice thing that mesh brings, of course, is the single SSID. And this is where we get into things like band steering. If you have an extender, AP steering, you're steering from the router to the extender. And of course, band steering is between the two bands available with Wi-Fi 6. And balancing, offloading those clients. Network, you only see that one single network, and the system decides where you should be placed. Another nice thing that mesh brings is the is the load balancing and AP steering. Whether you're moving away from the device, closer to the device, being shifted to the 5 gigahertz when you're closer, to the 2.4 when you step further out because of the footprint. Obviously, the 2.4 has a much larger footprint, so we get more in there, more coverage area. So these are just some advantages that come along with a mesh solution. All right, and just another overview of what a mesh system. Of course, we ultimately want to manage it with, which I'll get into at the end. But again, you have that one, and you have that blanket coverage, that umbrella to cover the entire home. All right, and before we get into this a bit more, we'll start with our first poll.
Okay, thank you very much, Andrew. Interesting introduction there. And that, as Andrew says, brings us to our first poll. We're going to have 2 polls in this webinar. And just before Andrew goes on to talk about Wi-Fi 6, we'd like to ask you which Wi-Fi technology you're currently offering to your subscribers. We've given you 4 options. We are currently deploying a Wi-Fi 6 solution. We're looking to deploy either a Wi-Fi 6 or 6E solution. We're currently deploying a Wi-Fi 5 solution, or none. Our subscribers bring their own gateway. So if you can take a look at those options and see which is most appropriate to your situation, that would be great. And actually, while we're waiting for people to vote on the poll, there is a question that's come in that I think is relevant, Andrew. So I'll ask you that now. And the question is, what percentage of the current households may need a Wi-Fi extender or mesh? Any ideas on that? That's a fairly open question.
You know, it like I mentioned, it's really tough because there's no one size fits all solution when it comes to extenders and home sizes in general. But I want to say, from the most part, for the most part, 10%, a little bit more would actually require an extender, especially with gateways, routers that are being deployed with high power. So we can really broadcast and shoot out that umbrella as wide as we can to cover the entire home. Most part, most homes are using, but I mean it still varies so very much. Especially again with much larger homes, you're obviously going to need some extenders to extend your coverage. But I want to say maybe the average home, average user, it's not too much.
Okay, great. It's very, very relevant. I've actually just put a Wi-Fi 6 mesh in my home, so but anyway, I'm probably not typical. Anyway, let's go on to the results of the poll. So we've got 35% saying we're currently deploying a Wi-Fi 6 solution, 20% for Wi-Fi 6 or 6E, 35% for Wi-Fi 5, and then just under 10% saying none of our subscribers bring their own gateway. So, Andrew, I'm just wondering, does that sort of match with what your customers are telling you?
Yeah, for the most part, I know a lot of people we work with are moving away from 5 solution and looking at either the 6 or 6E. I mean, there's a lot of advantages, which I'll get into on Wi-Fi 6 over Wi-Fi 5. So it's definitely something to look at moving forward.
Okay, great. Well, let's get on to that, and I'll pass back to you.
Sure. Okay, so just a bit more about the home internet, essential now, right? Point of the home. And now I'll get into a bit about the behind the scenes, let's say, of Wi-Fi 6 and 6E. So with Wi-Fi 6, 802.11ax, we're working for faster speeds, better coverage, handling more devices. There's a whole slew of things that of features and technologies that have been developed and continue to be developed and improved upon that go into Wi-Fi 6. But ultimately, what they deliver is up to 4 times the bandwidth over Wi-Fi 5. We have lower latency, better handling of communication between clients and the router, more connected devices, again, that ever-growing smart home is leading to having more devices connected throughout the home, and improved battery life for Wi-Fi 6 clients that are connected to a Wi-Fi 6 gateway. So I'll get into each of these now. So this one's fairly straightforward, up to 4 times faster than Wi-Fi 5, the previous generation. So we're seeing improvements of wireless speed, throughput, as we make these transitions to newer Wi-Fi. This is a real big one in terms of communicating to devices and handling more devices at the same time. 4 times the capacity over Wi-Fi 5. Big improvement, especially in terms of communication. It's no longer like, especially with MIMO technologies like that being improved. We have more communication with more devices at the same time. So in the past, Wi-Fi 5, Wi-Fi 4, it was almost like a sort of wait your turn in terms of communicating with the router, getting what you need done. And with Wi-Fi 6, we're seeing that capacity increase where we can talk to multiple clients at the same time and get things done faster, and overall a better experience. Of course, going to Wi-Fi 6, there are backwards compatibility, no problem. It still uses the same bands, listed on Wi-Fi 4 and Wi-Fi 5. So we're still able to use those same devices with the Wi-Fi 6 gateway and take advantage of some of the improvements with Wi-Fi 6, especially in terms of, like I mentioned, the communication with multiple clients at the same time. Wi-Fi 6 also improves, again, the handling of all the clients at the same time, the communication with all of them at the same time. But what we can think of it as like a giant beehive, right? All the devices within the beehive with the router in the center, kind of moving around, moving from place to place, location to location. Now we're able to better track and identify where clients are. So there's no longer, let's say, wasted airspace in terms of broadcasting out and finding where is this client, where is that client. With Wi-Fi 6, we're able to better track and identify exactly where the wireless clients are. Better communication, more efficient. That's really what Wi-Fi 6 is really brings, is high efficiency, right? We're trying to make things much smoother for our subscribers, things that are happening automatically in the background that they don't even think about. The Wi-Fi 6 gateway is taking care of. Another interesting topic or feature that Wi-Fi 6 brings is target wake-up time, and the ability of Wi-Fi 6 clients to communicate with a Wi-Fi 6 router or extender to minimize the communication, really. Target wake-up time so that if the device is not in use, it's not actively sending and receiving, probing on the Wi-Fi, which results in saving because it's not constantly using that Wi-Fi to communicate, so it has time to preserve that battery life. Oops. And finally, with Wi-Fi 6, brings about the latest wireless security, WPA3. In a lot of cases, you just need to update your the client side, whether it's a laptop, phone, to be able to support the latest and greatest WPA3 security. But most routers and extenders support a multi-mode WPA2. So a lot of that is not too much to be. Okay, so next up is Wi-Fi 6E, and obviously Wi-Fi 6 extended. We're extending into the 6 gigahertz spectrum, and ultimately we're going into a brand new space, really, especially within the home, and small office, things like that, where there's indoors, really, where we have a brand new spectrum to work with, the 6 gigahertz spectrum, which opens us up to a lot more capability in terms of throughput and really coverage in terms of congestion, let's say. Since it's not a used spectrum, especially indoors, we have, it's clean. Not only clean, there's a whole lot more channels to select, to work with, not to mention these, the 6 gigahertz spectrum, all brand new. Yeah, there's just a whole lot more to work with. And in having this clean, fresh space to work with, we have, the ability to offer higher throughput, more capacity. So it definitely is a changer in terms of, a game changer in terms of what we can offer. Especially with legacy devices, offloading legacy devices to the pre-existing 2.4 and 5G, and then newer devices onboarding, oncoming with the Wi-Fi 6E support. So with the introduction of Wi-Fi 6E, we have what is really considered now a true tri-band router, having 3 different radios in there. 3 different bands, so a true tri-band. In the past, we did see a lot of routers emerge with tri-band capabilities, but they included 2 5G radios, usually one for dedicated backhaul, something like that. But with Wi-Fi 6, we're seeing a real tri-band routers emerge and having the capability, again, all 3 bands. So with the like I mentioned, a bit more to work with, more capability, no overlap, no interference between the 3 bands. So we're able to dictate and decide how and where to better place clients. Mesh, things like that will still work between the 2.4 5G, and new clients that support 6G will be able to work with that as well. So there's a lot more flexibility that adding that third radio brings, and not to mention the advantages of having that third radio and the capabilities of that radio. And that's what I'll get into now, some of the benefits of the 6G space and Wi-Fi 6E. So the theoretical speeds are the max connected rates. We're looking to be able to achieve over 10 gigs roughly. So it's definitely a big boost up in terms of throughput, bandwidth, really something to take advantage there. But again, we're getting newer radios, but a bit of a smaller footprint. So it's you got to be kind of close to the device to see those, really high, very high throughput. Something that's, again, constantly evolving. We'll see improvements again as we move forward to Wi-Fi 7. So again, wider channels, more channels to play with, less interference, less overlap. So Wi-Fi 6E and the 6 gigahertz spectrum, seeing in the future at least, it could be a lot of potential for MDU, things like that in that space where, the routers are sort of close together, overlap. Having that new spectrum gives us a lot more to work with, a lot more capacity with deployments. But again, gigabit speeds, of course, with a Wi-Fi 6E client, we are seeing that pretty easily and reliably over a gig speed with a mobile client on 6E. And, that's just going to continue to be improved upon as we move forward. And of course, some of the advantages of where you'd want to take advantage of the 6E space, especially in the home for now. There's not a whole lot of clients, but that should be going up quite a bit as we move forward again, as more of these get adopted and forward to Wi-Fi 7 and using that 6 gigahertz space. All right, and with that, we'll get to our next poll.
Thanks, Andrew. And as you said, this is now our second poll. And the question is, and this is really looking forward to what Andrew's going to be talking about next, and that is, are you deploying multi-gig services? Once again, we've given you 4 options. Yes, already offering up to 2 gig service. Yes, exploring offerings up to 10 gigabits per second. No, but plan to offer multi-gig service options in the future. And then finally, no plans to offer a multi-gig service option. So once again, please take a look at those options and see which is most suitable for your particular situation. And while everyone's doing that, Andrew, I've actually got another quick question for you that's come in from the audience. And the question is, do smartphones use target wait time as well as IoT devices? Oh, you seem to be muted, Andrew.
Sorry about that. Yes, they both can take advantage of it. But I find that, in terms of what's actually available, a lot of them, especially with the 2.4 gigahertz, the longer range. So a lot of them are connecting at wireless end speeds, not needing a whole lot of bandwidth. So they may not necessarily be Wi-Fi 6 capable, but those that are can definitely take it.
Okay, great. We've actually had some really good questions in, so please keep those coming, and we'll take some more when we get to the end of the next section. So in the meantime, let's go on now to the results of this poll. And we've got just under 13% already offering up to 2 gig service, almost 40% say yes and exploring offerings up to 10 gigabits per second. 32% no, but plan to offer multi-gig options in the future. And then finally, 16% have no plans to offer multi-gig service options. Andrew, is that sort of what you're seeing in the market at the moment? Does that reflect a typical response?
I believe so, yes, definitely. I know a lot of, at least from our customer base, are reaching up to a gig now. But ultimately, I'd say that a lot of providers aren't seeing much benefit in offering beyond a gig. But there is demand for it, and there is obviously a lot of marketing around it, especially on the cable side now with the new DOCSIS coming out. They're offering 2 gig service as well. There's a lot of variables, but moving forward, especially with, in terms of Wi-Fi and what Wi-Fi is going to be able to do and capable of, it's no longer going to be, having the Wi-Fi keep up with the bandwidth demand. It's going to be having the bandwidth demand keep up with the Wi-Fi, especially when we come to Wi-Fi 7. So I think everyone moving forward is going to, forced to decide and really move on to multi-gig and offer beyond gig service, definitely.
Okay, great. So I think you're going to take a look at multi-gig now. So let's get on with that part of the presentation.
Yep. Okay, so why stop at a gig, right? A lot of customers, subscribers may not be able to use their entire gig. I know from a provider's perspective, you can actually see the usage even during peak times. They may not even be coming close, but a lot of it is being, again, marketed around, pushed around, offering multi-gig service, up to 10 gig service now, especially with XGS-PON, GPON technologies. Things like active Ethernet even are really starting to take off. And symmetrical 10 gig, I mean, who wouldn't want that, right? I mean, just to say you have it, which it sort of ultimately comes down to is really, what are you going to do with all the bandwidth? But, it's one less limiting factor in terms of technology growth in general, right? Having the ability or the capability to use all of that bandwidth at once, we're going to find a way to use it, is basically what I'm trying to say. There's going to be, it's one less limiting factor as far as being able to do something over the internet, right? So really offering multi-gig is something that's going to be, I think pushed and touted for quite a while. And we're going to see some big advantages coming once we hit, especially with Wi-Fi 7. Okay, so why a 10 gig gateway? Well, it pairs nicely with Wi-Fi 6, Wi-Fi 6E. Again, especially with Wi-Fi 6, ability of a mobile device going over a gig in terms of throughput. Having multiple devices being able to do that at the same time, even better, right? But the nice thing with the 10 gig gateway and 6 or 6E is having the options, the ability to upgrade as needed. So you can keep that same gateway in place, and you can tier service and, offer upgrades as needed. The common ones we see lately are 2, 5, and 8 gig services being offered. But pairing with a 10 gig gateway and a Wi-Fi 6E or 6 solution is ultimately going to give you the best foot forward, trying to future-proof stay in front of the bandwidth demands as well as the Wi-Fi, kind of, combining the latest and greatest of what's available now into one so that we have something to move forward with. And like I said, try to at least future-proof what we can in the subscriber's home. Again, seeing that move up to a 10 gig WAN, a big change from the traditional 1 gig offering that pretty much everyone carries. But now we're seeing these emerge with the 10 gig option out to the world. And what a lot of providers are starting to look at, or starting to show interest in terms of getting ready for what's next. Okay, and as I mentioned, easier to deploy and upgrade when you have the best of the best all bundled into one solution, and you can as your network expands, as your network grows, you're able to keep that same gateway in place. So ability, if you were to deploy now and only offer a gig service, with the network being scaled up eventually to 10 gig, keeping that same gateway is definitely a great option. And the big question, right, that always comes about is, how do you know you're getting what you paid for? We've seen struggles for as long, right? It's never been up to par. Speed tests, online speed tests really kind of ruin that for everyone. I mean, benefit to some, but ultimately leads to complaints, poor experience ultimately when they don't see what they're paying for. So with the current devices on the market, let's say, we see hardware limitations. The LAN side doesn't match the WAN side. So you have, let's say, 2.5 gigs out to the internet. You only have one coming into the LAN ports are limited at one, and then your Wi-Fi. So comes down to education, right? Explaining to your subscribers that it's a shared bandwidth, that everyone's taking a piece of the pie at the same time. And if you add them all up, you'll be at your limit, be able to achieve all the speeds that you need, things like that. But a lot of customers just want to see it from one device, right? One single device being able to eat up all the bandwidth at once with a speed test. And it's going to come down to is just being able to brag that you can run a 10 gig speed test to start, especially like, what are you going to do with all that bandwidth? Run a speed test, right? But we're also seeing that emerge to a matching internal port, a LAN port, whether it's 2.5 gig LAN, having that through and through design, that capability to run speed tests and really pull all the bandwidth that you're able to from that single connection. Really ideal for self-testing, installation, being able to set it up and go, and then run that speed test to be able to, hey, there you go, that's your speed, that's what you're running with. So it really gives us a big advantage in terms of satisfying those subscribers that always want to be sure they're getting what they paid for via speed test. Okay, so will any router do? Of course, any router will work in terms of providing wireless, providing coverage. Usually anything off the shelf would suffice in terms of providing a wireless experience. But especially from a provider's perspective, that you want to have, I'd say, a bit more control of, more capability, more insight really into what's going on with your subscribers. So any router will do, but from a service provider's perspective, you want something that comes bundled with remote management capabilities. In this case, carrier grade TR69, which I'll get into now. But traditionally, most, if not all, routers come with some sort of remote management capability. Having to walk a customer through that, to just have them enable it so that you can pop in and take a look. It's very time consuming, it's not beneficial in the long run to have to support a variety of routers off the shelf. Whereas you can find one with, TR69 capabilities and be able to manage it from an ACS, something like that. So Cloud Connect, of course, all routers get online, right? But for the most part, from a provider perspective, it's not that simple. You want something, again, with those TR69 capabilities. All right, so we'll get just briefly into managing your subscribers, managing your Wi-Fi, and really manage Wi-Fi. So in the day-to-day of working with your subscribers, as far as support-wise, there's just a handful of things that you can that you regularly interface with, as far as updating passwords, onboarding new clients, but really having the ability to do this without having to go on site is what we're really after. Being able to remotely do everything. Again, instant troubleshooting, routine maintenance, whether it's updates, you have a firmware update, you don't want to update those one by one, you want to batch update them. So this is where an ACS and TR69 really comes into play in helping save costs, save time, and really provide, again, the best experience for your subscribers. So with TR69, ACS brings about the ability for a zero-touch configuration, sort of having your settings customized, burned in, so that once the device is deployed, it phones home instantly and you can interface with it, you can update it, you can make changes, set up configuration, whatever the case may be. So, and it also benefits in the long run as far as self-installs, having the customer, again, just plug and play, really, especially with that configuration already built in, so it phones home immediately. Definitely an advantage. We're really seeing that transition from the locally hosted ACS to everything being in the cloud, offloading those maintenance. As your network expands, you have to expand your servers to be able to support more subscribers, things like that. So we're seeing a big transition from everything being locally hosted to now everything obviously in the cloud, ACS in the cloud. A lot of vendors already moved this way. But we're also seeing on that flip side is a transition from the traditional TR69 ACS to a cloud managed service, let's say, which again does offer the same managed mesh Wi-Fi, but gives you even more insight without using the traditional TR69, more of an open source management platform that gives you even more insight. So here's an example of one of the applications, and you can see it gives you a very detailed breakdown of the home, almost like a blueprint, bird's eye view. Even kind of gives you an idea of where things are connected in the home. So it's really taking all of the useful data, again, that was used in TR69 as well, and displays it really nicely for you here with all how it's connected, signal, everything really nice laid out, easy to see, easy to click through. Definitely gives you an advantage. Another nice, useful, well, really with cloud in general, is having historical data, being able to track and trace problems, look for patterns, things like that. Within some cloud platforms, it makes it much easier. This one, for example, makes it really easy in identifying those patterns. If there's a routine problem that pops up every so often at the same time, you can better identify if there's something in the advantage in terms of and and solve them before, a customer calls and complains, or, they request someone to come out, something like that. And a lot of this is starting to become AI driven, as far as, taking all of this data, really finding out, analyzing it, right? And then determining if there's a potential problem, if there's something that can be improved with a click of a button, even if it's just as simple as a channel change, right? So again, working proactively to provide the best experience for your subscribers. On the flip side of that is, of course, a customer-facing portal, or an app. Everything's an app nowadays, so having the ability to control, manipulate, set parental controls, turn internet network right from your phone, whether you're home or not. You're on the road and you need to turn up a guest network. You have that ability, again, all from your phone. So as things move forward with everything cloud-based, a lot of more open source stuff coming out, we're seeing a lot more in terms of what we can do, what we can see from the provider perspective, as well as the subscriber being able to do all of that as well from their side. Okay, and finally, the latest and greatest from the Broadband Forum, TR369, which is building upon TR069 and the pre-existing platforms that continue to move forward, to continue to progress, and again, the industry. So we should all be able to play nice and work together. But the other big upside here is the IoT capabilities that it's going to bring. User services platform, and giving providers and subscribers more control over those IoT devices that are deployed in a home. More insight for a provider to see about usage, things that are going on. So there are some definite advantages, and of course we still have the same capabilities as traditional TR69. We're just moving forward with and expanding upon it, really, to get more insight into the home, more control over the connected devices. Okay, and that is that. But I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsor, Walker and Associates, our top distributors, and a distributor of really all of your networking needs from the ground up.
Okay, great. Thanks very much, Andrew. That brings us on now to the Q&A session. We've had some really good questions come in, actually, so I'd like to just take a few of those. I guess just going back to 6E, there's a question here, and I guess it may need a bit of expansion. So in what sense is 6E not backwards compatible? Is that it won't work with older devices, or is it that obviously the 6 gigahertz isn't backwards compatible, but in terms of the 2.4 and the 5, is it as backwards compatible as 6, or is there some change that's going on there?
So when we say it's not backwards compatible, it's almost like it's not forwards compatible. Because the 6 gigahertz radio is new, legacy older devices on the market simply don't have that capability. It's really a hardware limitation, right? They don't have the capacity to go into that 6 gigahertz space. So that's why we say it's not backwards compatible with legacy clients. But of all the 6E solutions I've seen, at least on the market, we still have the 2.4 and 5G radios available, true tri-band. So we're not leaving those behind. They're still able to utilize the existing spectrums, whereas new devices coming to the market will likely have that 6 gigahertz support and be able to take advantage of 6E as well as 2.4 and 5G. So I hope that addresses.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think so. And obviously, if you use the 6 gigahertz for a backhaul or something, then that would be much the same as using as using a 6, except that you've got this extra bandwidth for the backhaul.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, great. Right, so there's a few questions here around the things you were talking at the end. And actually, I'll go to one other question here. So I think you sort of alluded to this a little bit. So the question is, I've got a customer, well, this is the person who sent the question in, not me. So our listener has a customer who would like to jump directly to Wi-Fi 7. Is that something that's logical?
Absolutely. But Wi-Fi 7 isn't ready yet. That's the biggest caveat right now. We need to wait towards the end of the year when the certification run with something that is Wi-Fi 7 certified. I noticed, I believe a few vendors already released a Wi-Fi 7 product, but you're missing the certification, which is a big, well, if something changes before, I mean, there's potential to get in too early, sort of like we did with wireless N technology, and we had the pre-N space. But ultimately, skipping over 6E, sure, is definitely something that can be done. You just have to wait a while. But really, 6E is getting us ready for 7. With 7, we're still going to take advantage of that 6 gigahertz space. So really, it's almost like the stepping stone up to what's next. But in terms of usability, 6E should be around for quite a while. If the adoption rate for 7 is the same as we've seen with 6E.
Right. Okay, great. And actually, it's kind of a similar question. It actually came in before you got on to TR369. So the question is, should TR369 be used for new deployments?
Oh, yes, sure. So
I mean, I guess the question is, are there any issues with non-compatibility with older equipment or whatever that you need to be aware of if you're going to do that?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, obviously you want device router extenders that support TR369 USB. If they do not, we still have that same traditional TR69 capability, but more than likely we're going to see new deployments, fresh deployments supporting TR3. Are already deployed that can be upgraded to TR369 support, which is definitely something that I think we'll see. But ultimately, I think in the long run, it's going to be sort of a, new deployment type of thing, especially as vendors, ACS vendors, TR69 vendors, work their way up to supporting it. I think I only know of a handful now that are capable of it. So, as things progress, we should see new deployments with TR369.
Okay, and while we stay on the TR69, and I think this question applies to 369 as well. So the question is, how is this information secured? It seems like showing a lot of information that the audience person would not want bad guys to see or know about.
I think this is related to sort of the bird's eye view and almost a little too intrusive looking, right? Well, a lot of this, again, cloud-based, right? So a lot of it is secured behind, I want to say, like AWS, things like that. So there are those frontline security measures, of course, and then everything having tiered access for login, things like that. There's a lot of ways that information is secured and not let out, especially, well, a lot of it is sort of the responsibility of that vendor, right, of that provider who's providing the solution to you, that platform to work with. But as far as the back-end communication, that is all, I'd say 9 times out of 10, secured via HTTPS. So there is going back and forth, but nobody can really see what's going on without decrypting those endpoints. So it's definitely secure.
Okay, great. We've had a couple of questions come in on on testing. One was saying running a speed test on Windows machine or even the latest Apple iPhones don't really have the hardware to test 160 megahertz. So what approach would you recommend? And then there's a second question for testing 10 gigabits per second. What would you suggest people use?
Well, there's no easy answer here. A lot of it has to do with using the latest and greatest equipment. In terms of 10G testing, or some sort of adapter, like they mentioned, there's not a whole lot of devices just on the market coming with a 10G connection. Obtaining it usually Thunderbolt technology up to 40 gigs. So a 10G adapter like that can add the capacity to run a speed test, especially with the 10G, matching 10G port. But in terms of speed tests over the wireless, that's always going to be a struggle. I know the iPhones are a bit behind in terms of the entire channel width support, only supporting 80 megahertz. So there's a lot of variables, too many variables. But that's why we're seeing that bundled LAN port to match the WAN side capacity, so that you can run a wired speed test. Wi-Fi is not perfect; it's not exact, right? So when it comes, and I know everyone wants to do it wirelessly, but it's not always as reliable. It's not always. I mean, even if you're using, let's say you run a speed test and you're somehow connected to the 2.4 gigahertz, you're not going to have the same speed capability as you are in the 5 gigahertz. So that's another variable to throw in. So there's just a lot of obstacles, let's say, in the way of really getting a reliable wireless speed test. We usually recommend a wired speed test, and again, bundling a 10G WAN, 10G LAN port, 2.5G WAN and LAN port gives you that advantage to run a wired speed test. Maybe easier during installation, but it's easier to educate and explain to customers that, hey, this is a hardware limitation. You need to update your Ethernet adapter, let's say, explaining about wireless, right? It's a bit easier to understand, at least.
Okay, great. Another question here. Do you think there's a future for wireless internet service providers in terms of using Wi-Fi 6E for point-to-multipoint solutions?
That is a good question. I don't have an exact answer for that. I mean, I think the downside here is the point-to-point, multipoint, is the 6E coverage area, right? The footprint. It's not as, it's not as large as the 2.4, as so we're going to have coverage limitations. That's an interesting question I could definitely take offline and look into.
Okay, so I think we're running out of time a little bit here. We've perhaps got time for one more question. So there's a few here. So I guess this is an interesting one. This goes back to the backwards compatibility, I think. So do Wi-Fi client devices benefit from connecting to a Wi-Fi 6 router or 6E router?
Oh, yes, definitely. In terms of capacity, in terms of communication in general, you can have faster communication because the Wi-Fi 6 and 6E solutions, they can talk to more clients at the same time. So we have more efficient communication. So legacy clients will definitely be able to take advantage of that when it comes to Wi-Fi 6 technology in general. And 6E to 6E clients will definitely be able to take advantage as well.
Okay, great. Well, I think we've actually run out of time today. So thank you very much for joining us today. And I'd like to thank you thank Andrew for his interesting presentation as ever. So thanks for that. And thank you for listening today, and have a great day.